Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another City Nature Challenge Nature Chat. For those of you who haven't seen any of our videos yet so far, we're over the bank holiday. We've seen over 3,000 people in the UK out snapping photos of the nature on their doorsteps and sending them in via the free iNaturalist app to take part in the International City Nature Challenge, which this year saw over 400 city regions worldwide, 14 of which were in the UK, working together to really put wildlife on the map whilst in lockdown. And across the whole of the UK, you have collected over 54,000 wildlife observations so far, which is just absolutely amazing. We are now outside of the photo taking window for collecting those new records, but we do have a few days left to upload and process any of the photos that you happen to have taken over the weekend and might contain some wildlife somewhere before the final tally is announced on the 10th of May. And so this afternoon, we've been asking people to get involved, to help jumping onto that iNaturalist app and using the identify function to help identify some of those photos that have been uploaded where people haven't been quite sure what they've seen, and really crowdsourcing how we can see what kind of wildlife is out there and has been spotted. And so as part of that, this afternoon, we'll be geeking out live with some of the UK's top wildlife experts. And you can see some instructions for how to get involved in identifying some of those records. There's links in the description for this video, and you'll also find them at citynaturechallenge.org.uk as well. And so this afternoon, it is my pleasure to welcome Rebecca from Froglife to chat to us today about frogs and toads and identifying the UK amphibians. And she's got some amazing props that I've already had a sneak peek of as well. So welcome to you, Rebecca, as well. And let's chat frogs and toads.
Excellent. So,
yeah, do you want to start with just sort of introducing yourself and thinking about it, and a little bit about how you got bitten by the amphibian bug?
Well, yeah. So my name is Rebecca, and I work for a project for Froglife called the London Tales of Amphibian Discovery, or London Toad Project, and we travel all over London, taking the wonderful news of the toads. Trying to encourage people to engage in their local wildlife, to learn about toads, learn that you can find them in your gardens, in your parks, and you can help them because unfortunately, the common toad has declined by 68% in the last 30 years. So it's really something that we need to keep an eye on, and there's something that we have, most people will be able to find just by going out into their parks in the middle of the city. And I just think sometimes people forget that the city is full of wildlife. And I think that's what really gets me about this project is trying to engage people with what's on their doorstep. Because that's where I started, really. Yeah.
Amazing. So those are some huge declines. Do we know what kind of things are causing those declines?
So there's a general habitat loss. I think the number is 90% of ponds have disappeared since the 19th century. Ponds are quite a man-made structure, really, and we used to have them absolutely covering the UK. Every farm had a farm pond. And with changes in farming techniques, they have often been filled in, and there's just no clean pond areas anymore, really, for our amphibians. And they really do react to pollutants and things because they breathe through their skin. They have quite a absorbent skin, so they can get very affected by bad quality water. So there's not many places to live. But then with the toad in particular, they do a big en masse migration every spring from their hibernating grounds, which are away from the pond, back to the pond, usually the pond that they were hatched in, to to mate and spawn, and that's really a vital part of their reproductive cycle. And these toads go along the same routes that they go every year for thousands, possibly thousands of years. And apologies for that. And we build roads across it, and we build infrastructure, and we build buildings and houses, and they just keep going. If they get to a road, they're not going to go, oh, I think I'll go to a pond over here. They just go straight across. And so you get hundreds of these toads crossing the roads all at the same time, and just one car can wipe out dozens. So we think that's probably the main specific reason for the toad decline, as well as the extra pressure of habitat loss.
And Froglife has particular programs as well for helping with that exact problem. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of what people can do and how people can get involved with that kind of thing as well?
Yes, so we have this fantastic thing called the Toad Patrols, and these are groups of volunteers who we support, but they self-organize to go out during this migration, and with gloves and a bucket and a torch, because it's often the damp nights. It's not the most pleasant time to go out, but they do, and they pick up the frogs on one side of the road and they move them to the other side. And it's such a simple thing, but they have saved so many individuals by doing that. And it's just fantastic. It's such a commitment to every year do that. And we have them all over the country, identifying local people, identifying where these toads are crossing, where it's most at need, and then organising the patrols on the right evenings at the right time of the year. And actually, the 68% decline that we've seen is from data from that, as it has been going on for 30 years now, and we're still got patrols all over the UK.
Amazing. That's 30 years of dedicated toad patrollers.
Yeah.
And what sort of time of year is that migration that people could maybe get involved in their local toad patrols?
So we're looking end of February, early March, with a bit of prep beforehand. So it's a lot to do with the weather. So I think people start getting prepared in February for it to start happening, but some places earlier. I know that in some ponds in London, they had spawn already at the beginning of February, whereas other places that might have a cooler climate will have spawn slightly later. So it's a bit of a rough estimate, really, when that'll happen in different parts of the country.
And so I assume people can go on the Froglife website to sort of find their local toad patrol contact and sign themselves up ready for next year.
Yes, www.froglife.org, and you'll find it.
Always get the URL in there as well. Fantastic. So it's really interesting that you mentioned the data there as well, and it'd be really interesting to hear maybe a bit about before we kind of dive into the toads themselves, but maybe think about. It'd be great to hear a bit about how Froglife is maybe using some of the data, like the kind of things that people have been collecting through City Nature Challenge, that kind of location data. How a charity like Froglife uses that to inform what you're doing and how you're conserving these groups as well.
So we do encourage new patrols where we know that there are places where there's a big toad migration, but we've also we have a lot of projects that are based around data that has previously been collected. So the London Toad Project has a large amount of it is towards restoration and creation of new ponds in London. And many of those sites have been identified from citizen science data that has been collected, places that we may not have realised had quite a reasonable toad population, but no pond. So we've actively used that to choose our locations to really focus our conservation efforts.
Amazing. So it's really vital data then.
Oh, absolutely.
Fantastic. I've started to get some questions here, and now I've just hidden the page. Sorry, 2 seconds. I'm just moving things around. We're starting to get we're starting to get some questions. It's maybe thinking about cut to the chase of thinking about identification. Think about at the moment, this time of year, we're seeing a lot of tadpoles, maybe more than adults, and really think about the top tips for how do you tell a frog tadpole from a toad tadpole.
So it's a little tricky. When they are first hatched, it's almost impossible, unless you can see that they've been hatching from frog spawn or toad spawn, because those look different as well. Frog spawn is in the classic blobs of lots of blobs of jelly all stuck together floating on the surface, and then toad spawn is in strings 2 by 2 for the common toad, and they tend to wrap that around vegetation at the bottom of the pond. But once the tadpoles have hatched and they've been around for a week or so, you can start seeing the difference. The frog tadpoles are much browner, they're more speckled, they have a more mottled appearance, while the toad tadpoles remain quite black. I know this sounds not much of a difference, but once you get your eye in, you can start seeing the difference between them, especially if there's a good light coming into the pond. You can really see the colors on their skins then.
Does it? And that almost leads into a little bit of another question from Victoria as well do you tend to get frogs and toads in the same place as well? Will they live together? Victoria says to you that they've got lots of frogs in their pond but haven't seen a toad in years. And will they live together, or do they exclude each other?
Though they will live together. I'm sure there's let me think. They will definitely live together, but they have slightly different niches. So a toad prefers a deeper pond where there's vegetation near the base where they can wrap their spawn around. So it might be that a pond that has an awful lot of frogs just hasn't got quite the right place, environment for the toad. Also, as I say, they tend to go back to the same places to breed as they were hatched, and that's the same with frogs. So it might just be that there's a natural balance. Some ponds have more frogs, some ponds have more toads. I'm just trying to think if there's another. And the other, yes, that is another thing. You might find that in some ponds, there's more toad spawn, or the frog spawn starts off there but it ends up disappearing, and that can be because it can have quite a high proportion of newts in the pond. The newts will eat the frog spawn much more than it will eat the toad spawn, because the toads have exude acetone, actually the same stuff that you get in nail polish remover, and it just tastes bad, so they're more likely to survive. Yeah, they can live together, but they're a slightly different.
I don't feel like I could let you get away with dropping that fact and not going further. That they leach acetone. That's insane.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite fact. So I'm going to bring in my prop here. This is my toad. I made him the other day. Hilariously, the first thing I was asked to do after I came off from furlough was to make a felt toad. So on the back of my toad, you'll see I've put these bumpy patches here, and these are glands that produce the acetone toxin, and the bumps on the back of a toad keep the liquid on the back of the toad, and it spreads over the back, and it makes them taste bad. And the toxin is also there in the tadpoles and in the spawn. They don't have the glands to produce it, but the bodies are still producing a small amount of it, which is making them just taste gross. But then you get some predators, like some foxes, you will find have learned that it's only the back of the toad that tastes bad. It's not actually the toad. So they will take a toad, they'll flip it over, and they'll eat the belly, and you'll just find sort of remains around the place, and it'll be
just bits of the backs of toads.
Yeah,
Gruesome.
because foxes can be quite specialized, and if they work something out, I mean, well, they're very similar to dogs, so if they work something out, they'll just keep doing it, especially if food is involved.
Amazing. So it's think about, maybe frogs that we've seen at zoos or on documentaries and things, that these brightly coloured jungle frogs that are the poison dart and things, but actually, it's the same sort of thing is happening right in potentially in your garden or local park as well.
Although this won't kill you,
Yeah.
which is nice to know.
Yeah,
it just, you might sometimes see a dog, snuffling and then realize, lick one, and they're just trying to get the taste out. It doesn't actually hurt them, thankfully. Or they would have even more of a bad rep than the poor guys have already. But they need this defense system against predators because unlike the frog, they don't have the ability to hop quite so far. Frogs have these huge folded legs and an angle on their back that allows them to spring and jump far further than you could imagine. I mean, they always surprise me how far they can jump, these tiny little things. Whereas toads tend to crawl around and they do little like sort of bumping hops like this, but yeah, they can't jump as far. So instead they sit really still when a predator comes and make themselves taste bad.
And is there a kind of, I suppose this is probably the question that you're asked most, I'd imagine, for things, but is kind of how do you tell a frog from a toad? We talked about the tadpoles, but in terms of the adults, if you were confronted with them, particularly if for people who are going to be on the iNaturalist looking at some of the photos, trying to help people identify things, what's the kind of the big headlines?
So I think it's slightly different for everybody, but you ignore the color. Just don't worry about the color. You get so many variations in common frog and common toad color that you should go for the head, especially often that's sticking above the water, and so you might see the head more. So if I show you this eye, I've made it's golden with an elongated horizontal pupil, and sometimes in pictures it just doesn't come out, but I cannot stress how golden a common toad's eye is. It's amazing. You look at this, what appears to be a little splodge of mud, and it's got these incredible eyes. And then on the frog, see if I can hold up my picture here. On the frog, they might have yellow eyes, but the biggest thing to look at is this patch here behind the eye. That sort of almost a tadpole shape, really. We call it a dark mask behind the eye. They will always have that shape. They will always have that piece behind the eye, whatever color they are, whatever size they are. If they're a common frog, they'll have that. So that's what I go for when I'm trying to, if I'm a bit unsure.
So frogs go for the kind of Mask of Zorro look.
Oh yeah.
That's a bit of a dated reference, I suppose, now, isn't it? Fantastic. So that's kind of a really top tip is if you want to know your frogs from your toads, you've got to look them in the eye.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we've been talking a lot about kind of frogs and toads as two species, essentially, haven't we? But I suppose there are others potentially that people could see in the UK outside of that kind of common frog and common toad. Is it worth touching on those kind of the wider amphibian groups as well?
So the other amphibians or other frogs and toads?
Should we start with other frogs and toads, because there's questions about newts in the comments?
Okay. So there are a couple. They tend to be very isolated. These are the ones that the common frog and common toad are spread across the UK. We have the natterjack toad, which is our other native toad. And then there's also the midwife toad, which is not a native, but you'll find them in, I think it's Bedfordshire, has a big population of midwife toads. They have the weirdest noise, and they carry their eggs around with them rather than laying them in a pond. So those are the other two you might find. The natterjack has they're smaller, they're daintier, and they have this very yellow line running straight down their back. But yeah, significantly rarer. And then with the frogs, we've got the pool frog, which is huge. And you may, if there's a lot of places in London actually that have resident pool frog populations, they can't spread as far, but they are a little bit of a problem because they do push out the native common frog. And they appeared because we thought at one time in Victorian times, I think it was, just thought that, you know what, the next thing will be all the French people are eating frogs' legs. We're going to do that too. And so they put a number of pool frogs and into the population. Oh, sorry, I've got it wrong. No, not pool frogs. Oh no. The pool frogs are the ones that are native. I'm sorry. Hang on. This is very embarrassing, isn't it?
Don't worry. This is why we need to. It's if anything, it's very helpful to see, because I think it's useful for people to see that it's very easy to get these things mixed up as well.
So there are these other frogs. There's a group of other frogs called the green frogs, and we have the pool frogs, which are the native ones, and you may have heard about them because they've been recently reintroduced into Norfolk, and they can be crossed with and I've just completely blanked on its name. There is a very large green frog that was introduced to the pool frog communities in the south east of England, and they crossed.
It's not a marsh frog, is it?
Marsh frogs, thank you.
I knew something. There was something just somewhere in the back of my mind that was going, I'm sure I've heard of.
Why that just didn't. Sorry, it's like pin numbers, isn't it? You know, talk about these things so much think about them. I don't talk about my pin number. Sorry, marsh frogs and pool frogs. Marsh frogs were introduced. Pool frogs were already native here, and they crossbreed to produce an edible frog, which are the ones that when people eat frogs' legs, that's what they're eating. But unfortunately, the pool frog species didn't do very well out of this because the marsh frog was more dominant, and the edible frogs are not able to breed. So basically the gene pool just reduced. Pool frogs the population reduced of pool frogs, and we ended up with these tiny pockets of pool frogs. So it's the marsh frogs that you might see in London, I'm sorry, where they've rather overrun certain areas, but they don't travel very far, so there's nothing that we do about that. They don't tend to move to new places very easily, so but you might spot those. They're huge and like plates of green frog, very different from our native ones.
Wow. So there are like sort of pockets, and it very much depends on where in the country you are as to whether you might see something other than the kind of common toad or the common frog.
Yeah.
Just to check in, we've got another question come in as well, which is asking about about pond water and looking after, and we've talked a little bit about some of the things that people can do, and a couple of the threats facing frogs and toads really about being one of them being that habitat loss and the lack of ponds. So if people are introducing a pond or have a pond in their garden that maybe needs emptying and refilling as part of the kind of maintenance, where should people be filling their pond water from? Where is tap water okay? Does it need to come from is it rainwater? Is it sourcing from another pond? What's the kind of the best guidance?
The best guidance is rainwater. Let it refill naturally if you can. Ponds dipping and increasing and dipping in level is actually a really important part of the pond cycle. Sometimes there's plenty of ponds that are really vital for wildlife that dry up completely every year, and actually it reduces disease. It reduces disease spread because everything dries up, dies, and then re-establishes. So if your pond is looking a bit dry, don't worry, just wait for the rain. If you are concerned, or it's not looking so good and it's your private garden, you'd like it to fill it up, put out some buckets and fill it with rainwater. Tap water just has too much chlorine in it. And even if you let it to stand, it is a little bit better if you let it to stand, but it's not as good. And you could just risk killing the things that are already living in the pond, which would be an awful shame. And your pond would have to start again from scratch. Concerning filling from other ponds, we really suggest not moving anything, vegetable matter, pond water, actual animals. If you do have to, we recommend 300 meters, no more than that, just because you're risking spreading diseases between the different places, and it's very easy, or invasive plants as well can get stuck to anything, the bottoms of frogs' feet or in the water. So it's best to just let it naturally do it with rainwater. Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's really helpful. If quite often these kind of conflicting messages that come out as well. So that's really helpful. And I think we've touched on, so as I say, we sort of touched on two of those really big challenges that are being faced by these species, and it's quite nice that there's kind of two really clear ways that people can get involved and can help with that as well, whether that's attracting wildlife to their own garden by putting in a pond, and helping with that habitat end of things, or if you don't have a garden or don't have access to that sort of outdoor space, then there's the opportunity to get involved with that toad patrol and be helping out on a voluntary basis as well. So it's great that there's those really kind of those actions that people can get involved with as well. Bringing things back, I suppose, a little bit to the data and recording side of things as well. Thinking about how people can get involved. Are there any sort of the sort of citizen science projects specifically that people can get involved with Froglife as well, if they've sort of had a taster through the City Nature Challenge and thought, do you know what, I want to get into my frogs and toads? How might they get involved in some things like that as well?
So we have a Dragon Finder app, is what we call it, and where you can, it has information on IDing the animals, and then you can log your sightings, and you can see all the sightings that you've logged, but that information also goes to us, and we send it on to national databases as well. So you can find that, Google Dragon Finder app, and you should be able to, there we are, should be able to find that. I find it, it's really, really useful, and it has, what I absolutely love is just being able to press the button and say, this is where I am. So you can do it instantly while you're out in the middle of somewhere. Just get your phone out and snap a picture if you can, but not, you don't have to if you're not able to get a picture of what you've seen, if it's too fast or anything. But you can exactly locate where you've seen it, which is really useful, because I personally find that a bit of a barrier sometimes to my recording is, I must remember to write that down and put it into the laptop when I get home, and then I'm like, which day was it, what wood was I in? I can't remember anymore. I can't even remember which end of the wood I was walking in. It's so I find that really useful.
Fantastic. So a lot of functionality very similar to the iNaturalist app that people might have been using for City Nature Challenge, but this way it goes directly to Froglife as well. So doesn't have that kind of lag time potentially of data being moved across as well. But our half hour is very nearly up, which time flies when you're having fun. But I suppose it'd be great to just get that kind of last top tip for people looking for frogs and toads, and wanting to sort of encounter some of these creatures over the summer as well. What would be your kind of top tip for toad spotting?
Don't be fooled by looking in the pond. So you might see the tadpoles growing up in the pond at the moment, but if you want to spot a toad, you should turn away from the pond, turn your back on it, walk into wherever you are, bit of woodland nearby, or if there's some rubble or something, and turn some rocks over, turn some logs over, look for really nice damp places, because once the toads have finished spawning, they will go back onto the land and feed on all sorts of things, slugs, wasps. They eat wasps. And they need to find damp places because they still have that skin that's very easy to lose water out. So you want to look for damp places just away from the pond is the best bet. But remember to put the logs back carefully because we don't want to squash them.
Sorry, excuse me. Right. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. That's about. Excuse me.
Oh no. What else could I tell you about ponds? So there are also amphibians. Other amphibians that you might find in the ponds are the newts, of course, which we didn't get around to talking about. There's palmate newts and smooth newts, and those are the two that are hardest to tell the difference. And I've just gone and forgot. I've just done it again. The great crested newt, thank you very much, which are the most incredible ones, and what the Dragon Finder app is named after. They are dragons in the pond. They are about this big, and they're protected by the government because we have one of the best populations of great crested newts in Europe. So we need to look after the ones that we have.
Thank you, Rebecca, for filling for me there. Sorry. I must have been talking too much this afternoon. So yeah, that's all we got time for. And huge thanks, Rebecca, for joining us. And to everyone, please do check out the UK DataBlitz Facebook page for more of these nature chats. We'll be going on for more of the day, and you can look back at the ones that we've already had. And have a go at identifying some sightings on iNaturalist from this year's City Nature Challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you.